The rain came down in sheets, blurring the neon glow of the pharmacy sign as Clara Hensley stood frozen under the awning, clutching a crumpled prescription in her trembling hand. Her thin coat, patched at the elbows, clung to her frail frame, soaked through from the walk across town. At 67, Clara's body felt like it was betraying her every step, a reminder of the cancer eating away at her strength, every breath a quiet plea to keep going. The pharmacist's words echoed in her mind. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but your insurance won't cover this." "It's $200 for the month." She'd nodded politely, her lips pressed tight to hide the panic, and slipped the prescription into her pocket, knowing she couldn't pay. Her savings were gone, drained by months of tests, hospital visits, and a life that seemed to unravel faster than she could stitch it back together. Clara's eyes stung not from the rain, but from the weight of it all. She'd always been the strong one, the one who baked pies for church suppers, who held her daughter's hand through heartbreak, who buried her husband, Tom, 5 years ago under a gray November sky. Now, standing alone in the cold, she felt like a shadow of that woman, wondering how she'd make it through another day. The pharmacy door chimed behind her, and Clara flinched, stepping aside as a man in a worn flannel jacket brushed past, his boots splashing in the puddles. He paused, glancing back at her, his face weathered but kind, like someone who'd seen his own share of hard days. "You okay, ma'am?" he asked, his voice low, almost lost in the rain. Clara forced a smile, the kind she'd perfected over years of small-town politeness. "Oh, I'm fine, just taking a moment," she said, her voice catching. She turned away, embarrassed, clutching the prescription tighter as if it could hold her together. The man didn't move. He stood there, hands in his pockets, watching her with a quiet intensity that made her heart skip. "Doesn't look like a fine kind of moment," he said softly, stepping closer. His name was Ray, though she wouldn't learn that until later a mechanic from the edge of town, widowed like her, with a daughter grown and gone. "You need a ride somewhere? This rain's no good for anybody." Clara shook her head, her pride flaring despite the ache in her chest. "No thank you, I'll manage." But Ray didn't leave. He tilted his head, his eyes catching hers, and said, "Nobody manages alone forever." Clara's breath hitched, and she looked down at the prescription, the paper now damp and smudged. She didn't know why. Maybe it was the rain. Maybe it was the way his voice reminded her of Tom's butt. She found herself telling him, not everything, just enough. The cancer. The pills she couldn't afford, the fear that kept her awake at night, wondering if she'd see another Thanksgiving with her daughter Ellie, who lived 3 states away. Ray listened, his face still, his hands steady as he nodded. "That's a heavy load," he said when she finished, his voice barely above a whisper. He didn't offer pity, didn't look away. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a worn wallet. "Wait here," he said, and before Clara could protest, he was through the pharmacy door, the bell chiming again. Inside, Clara watched through the glass as Ray spoke to the pharmacist, his hands gesturing, his head bowed slightly. Her stomach twisted. She wanted to run, to hide from whatever he was doing. But her legs wouldn't move. Minutes later, he came back, holding a small white bag with the pharmacy logo. "Here," he said, pressing it into her hands. "It's taken care of, for this month at least." Clara stared at him, her mouth open, words failing her. I can't take this," she stammered, her voice breaking. "You don't even know me." Ray shrugged, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Don't need to know you to know you're hurting. Just take it, Clara, please." Her name on his lips startled her. Shay hadn't told him. He must have seen it on the prescription bag, she thought, her fingers tightening around the paper. She wanted to argue, to push the bag back, but the weight of his kindness, so simple and unasked for, cracked something open inside her. Tears spilled down her cheeks, mixing with the rain, and she whispered, "Thank you." They stood there for a moment, the rain drumming around them, 2 strangers bound by a single act. Ray offered to drive her home, and this time, Clara didn't refuse. His truck was old, the kind with a bench seat and a faint smell of motor oil, but it was warm, and the radio played soft country tunes as they drove through the small Ohio town. The streets were lined with bare maples, their branches stark against the gray sky, and Clara watched them blur past, the pharmacy bag cradled in her lap. "Why'd you do it?" she asked finally, her voice small. Ray kept his eyes on the road, his hands steady on the wheel. "Lost my wife to cancer 10 years ago," he said. "Couldn't do much for her at the end. Felt helpless. Guess I saw a chance to do something for someone else." His words were plain, but they carried a weight that settled deep in Clara's chest. She nodded, her throat tight, and murmured, "I'm sorry about your wife." Ray glanced at her, his eyes softening. "I'm sorry about yours too," he said, though she hadn't mentioned Tom. It was a guess, maybe, or the kind of understanding that comes from shared loss. At her house, a modest clapboard with a sagging porch, Swingray helped her out of the truck, his hands steady under her elbow. Clara hesitated at the door, her key shaking in her hand. "Would you like some coffee?" she asked, her voice tentative. She hadn't had company in months, not since the diagnosis stole her energy for church suppers or book club. Ray's smile was small but genuine. "I'd like that," he said. Inside, the kitchen smelled of cinnamon and old wood, and Clara busied herself with the coffee pot, her hands moving on instinct. They sat at her small table, the mug steaming between them, and talked. Not about cancer or loss, but about simpler Things County fairs they'd loved as kids, the way the diner on Main Street made the best apple pie, the time Ray's daughter tried to fix his truck and ended up with grease in her hair. Clara found herself laughing, a sound so foreign it startled her. Ray's stories were quiet, his gestures small, a hand brushing the mug, a shy glance when he thought she wasn't looking. For the first time in months, Clara felt seen, not as a patient or a widow, but as herself. Days turned into weeks, and Ray became a quiet presence in Clara's life. He'd stop by with groceries, claiming they were extras from his own shopping, or sit with her on the porch swing, listening as she talked about Ellie, about Tom, about the life she'd built and feared losing. He never pushed, never asked for more than she could give, but his small acts, fixing her leaky faucet, bringing her a library book, leaving a thermos of coffee on her porch, wove a thread of hope through her days. Clara started to notice the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the way his hands, rough from years at the garage, were gentle when he handed her a tissue or steadied her arm. She caught herself looking forward to his visits, her heart lifting at the sound of his truck pulling into the drive. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something close, a connection that felt like a gift she hadn't expected to find. One snowy evening, as Christmas lights blinked on porches down the street, Clara sat at her kitchen table, the pharmacy bag empty now, the pills keeping her stronger than she'd been in months. Ray was there, his flannel jacket draped over a chair, a mug of cocoa in his hands. Clara had been quiet all evening, her thoughts heavy with a truth she hadn't shared. "Ray," she said finally, her voice trembling, "I got a call from the doctor today." His eyes met hers, steady but worried, and she took a breath. "The treatment's working, better than they hoped. They think I might have more time than they thought." Her voice broke, and she pressed a hand to her mouth, tears spilling over. Ray didn't speak right away. He reached across the table, his hand covering hers, warm and solid. "That's good news, Clara," he said, his voice thick. "That's real good news." But it wasn't just the news that broke her open, it was the weight of his hand, the way he'd been there, the way his kindness had carried her through the darkest months. She squeezed his hand back, her fingers trembling, and whispered, "I don't know how to thank you." Ray shook his head, his thumb brushing her knuckles. "You don't owe me a thing," he said. "Seeing you smile again, that's more than enough." Clara's heart swelled, a mix of gratitude and something deeper, something she hadn't felt since Tom. She thought of the years she'd spent alone, the nights she'd prayed for strength, for a sign she wasn't forgotten. And here was Ray, a stranger who'd become a friend, who'd given her not just medicine but hope, a reason to keep going. They sat in silence, the snow falling outside, the Christmas lights casting a soft glow through the window. Clara realized then that kindness wasn't just a moment, it was a ripple, spreading from one heart to another, changing everything. As spring came, Clara's strength grew. She started baking again, leaving pies on Ray's doorstep, her way of giving back. They'd walk together to the diner sometimes, sharing stories over coffee, their laughter mingling with the clink of dishes. Clara called Ellie more often, her voice brighter, her stories filled with Ray's name. And when Ellie came home for Thanksgiving, she hugged Ray tight, tears in her eyes, thanking him for giving her mother back. Clara stood on her porch that night, watching the stars, her heart full. She thought of the rain-soaked night at the pharmacy, the moment a stranger chose to see her pain and do something about it. It wasn't just the money, it was the belief that she was worth helping, that her life still mattered. This story is a work of fiction or dramatized for entertainment. While inspired by real human emotions, all characters, names, and events are fictional or modified. This content complies with YouTube's community guidelines and aims to inspire, not mislead. What's the kindest thing you've experienced? Share in the comments below, and let's spread a little hope together.